Hello, friends, and welcome to the latest episode of Social Harmony. Today, I'm joined by Nichole Hensley Henson, and her story is, I want to say, fascinating in many ways. Now, this starts off with some quite difficult things to talk about insofar as Nichole was sexually abused as a young girl. She was mentally abused and in torture for years and years. She, at the age of 12, began therapy and was then diagnosed, medicated, and such like for, I would say, at least 20 years from my basic arithmetic, and nothing worked. She got to the point where she'd given up on herself because different modalities of treatment weren't working. She'd even got a master's in social work so she could look to try and help others and then help herself, but it went nowhere until such point when she had a spiritual intervention. She talks of giving her life to God, and the way her life changed so completely and so totally to the woman that she is today, who spends her life looking after other people, helping others, is awe-inspiring. It really is. And so what starts out as really a sad, in fact a tragic tale, no two ways about it, becomes one partly of redemption, but predominantly of hope, that someone who's ready to write themselves off so completely found a way out, found the change that she needed. And so I hope you enjoy the episode. I hope you are uplifted as I was upon listening to it. And thank you again for joining me. Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode. Today I am joined by Nichole Hensley Henson. She is the co-founder of the Fullness of Joy Ministry and has got quite a story to tell. So please, Nichole, if I can ask you, could you just tell my listeners a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
Hello. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for the invite. I
A
love being
pleasure.
able to talk about
Pleasure.
the things that I've went through and the things that God has done in my life.
Hmm.
So a little bit about me. I'm in a new stage of my life right now. I'm a
Hmm.
new grandma. Well, it feels new to me. My oldest grandson is 19 months old, and then I have a 9-month-old grandson. So I'm doing the grandma thing and juggling
Congratulations.
that with Thank you. Thank you. Two boys. Two boys.
Hmm.
The Lord told me at the beginning of 2025 that our family was going to grow.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, Lord, where's that coming from? I never expected it was going to be a second grandson, and
Hmm.
boom, because it's by the same, my son and his wife, and they're only 12, like 13 months apart. So it's been really fun.
Hmm.
So that's been pretty much a big, huge part of my life and ministry, and just doing everything that I feel like God has called me to do. I have a heart for people. Once you hear my story, you'll understand why. A heart for
Hmm.
people who've walked through trauma. So I spend lots of hours with people just trying to help them get on the other side of trauma and then
Hmm.
being grandma.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Well, yeah, thank you for joining me. I do, I've read some of your story and I've got to say I'm fascinated by it. So, well, if I can ask you, can you take us back to your earlier years, where this all started off? Yeah, and if I can ask you in your own words, yeah, so we know where we're at.
Absolutely. I always go back to the beginning,
Hmm.
because I was born into a family with domestic violence. My
Hmm.
mom and dad, my biological dad, got married when she was young. She was, I think, 17 when they got
Hmm.
married. She was around 18 when she had me.
Yeah.
And I was born into a violent family. He, looking back now, I would, if I were diagnosing him, which I'm not, if I
Mm.
were, it would definitely include narcissistic personality disorder
Hmm.
because life had to revolve around him at all times. And if it didn't, he would throw a fit.
Yeah.
And that meant that we had to be silent when he was watching television. That meant that everything was about him. And it was just a very selfish life that I was brought into, and it was a very violent life. I don't ever remember him physically harming me, but I know he was physically harming my mom.
Mm.
And they separated when I was around 3 years old. He at the time lived in Florida with his family, and my mom moved back to Indiana in the United States. We're in the US.
Mm.
Moved back to Indiana to be close to her family. And I had to go every summer and every other Christmas to visit him. When I was around 7 years old, everything changed. I was brought up with both sides of my grandparents were in church. I was around the church. I knew who God was
Mm.
from a small, young standpoint.
Yeah.
I didn't know him personally, but I knew who he was, and I'd been around church. I'd been around like Bibles and talking about God.
Hmm.
And then that summer, when I went to visit my biological dad, when I walked into the home, I immediately knew that something was dark. I
Okay.
didn't have words, but just looking at the decor on their walls, they had wizards and magicians and magic and dragons. And he would be sitting at the kitchen table making jewelry, and he said that the crystals gave him power, and he had these special powers that nobody else had, and he was going to do all of these things, and he was raising up in the ranks of these groups. And I had no idea what any of that meant, but I
Mm.
knew that it was scary and
Hmm.
I knew it was dark. That's also the summer I remember when the sexual abuse started. I'm not going to go into detail here because that part doesn't matter,
Yeah.
but he was very sexual. He abused me and my step siblings because he was married. He married a new woman. They were both into witchcraft and the occult together.
Hmm.
And he sexually abused me and my two stepsisters. My one stepsister actually ended up, she was, I think 16 at the time when she got pregnant or when she had the baby, but she actually had a baby by him
Wow.
while I was still visiting before he had divorced that woman. They had my half sister, no, sorry, my stepsister had my half sister with my biological dad. So he was abusing all of the girls in the family. And more than the abuse, I think, because abuse is horrific enough on its own, but he
Mm.
would tell me that he could read my mind and that no matter where I was at, he would know if I was even thinking bad thoughts about him.
Mm.
And I can remember being very, very young and starting to suppress everything. I would count. I counted constantly. When the abuse was happening, I would count the tiles on the ceiling. When the abuse wasn't happening, so that I wouldn't think bad thoughts about him, I would count just inanimate objects in the room. And
Mm.
I would stifle every emotion because I really believed if I thought bad thoughts about him, that he would kill me and my mom. And
Mm.
so from the age of 7, I had the burden of saying, I can't even think bad thoughts about this man because he will come and hurt me. My identity never really formed because I was hiding everything and I was never comfortable in my own skin. I never
Mm.
could just breathe. I never could relax. It was kind of like my family thought I was just an old soul that fit
Hmm.
in with older people or older kids. But the truth of the matter was, I never could relax. There was no situation where I could be carefree and fun and just giggly like other
Mm.
kids. I can remember one time I came back from a visit and I had a box of Barbie dolls, and they were my most favorite toys. And that's what I would get for Christmas and my birthdays, and I had this huge box of them. And I had some favorites, and I pulled them out and I marked their face with ink. I just took a pen and marked all over their face. And
Mm.
my family, my mom and grandparents were so upset. They're like, "How could you do that? Why would you do that? They thought I was just acting out. But I know
Mm.
what I was doing. I was trying to show on the outside what I felt on the inside. And I
Mm.
can remember crying and not understanding why I had done that to my favorite toys. And yeah, I was acting out, but I was screaming for help, but
Mm.
nobody around me could understand that I was
Mm.
screaming. They didn't know how to recognize the signs. I'm 48 years old.
Mm.
Things were a lot different then. There wasn't a
Yeah.
lot of teaching about recognizing the signs of sexual abuse or abuse in general.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty much my childhood. When I was around 9, he left that woman and moved. His mom and dad had moved to Indiana, so he followed them back to Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was around 12, he tried to commit suicide. It was a failed attempt, but he had tried.
Mm.
And that's when my world really fell apart because I knew in that instant if he could hurt himself, there was absolutely no doubt that he could kill me and my mom.
Mm.
And so my life, I thought I knew terror before that, but I had no idea how bad it could get. I couldn't sleep at night. I would feel sick all the time. I felt like he was going to come hurt me, but I couldn't stay away from him because if I was staying away from him, that meant I was showing that he was a bad dad. And if I was
Mm.
doing that, then he would know that I was saying something bad about him. And it was just this vicious cycle.
Mm.
And that's when I started into therapy for the first time for myself. And that's when
Mm-hmm.
I first remember having concrete suicidal ideation. I was around 12 years old. Do you
Wow.
want me to keep going into adulthood or do you want to pause?
Um, well, if I could just, on, first off, I've got to say, thank you for sharing that with me. That's a lot. And so just for my own clarity, so from 7 years old to the point that we're at now, where you're 12 years old, you've
Mhm.
kept all of this inside. Nobody knew anything. You've not said anything to anybody. And
Nobody.
when you
I wouldn't even
say,
think about it. Like I
mm,
literally would not think about it because I thought I couldn't.
yeah,
Like I still believed by the age of 12, I still believed that I couldn't even think bad thoughts about him.
well, wow, that's just a level of manipulation that I just can't begin to wrap my head around. That's awful. And so when you say you went to therapy, were you referred by your mum? This is, acting out with the Barbie dolls and things like that. I mean, were there any other signs of acting out as such?
I was sickly. I missed tons and tons of school. I had chronic headaches, chronic stomach aches, just didn't feel good. I would cry. I was very emotional.
Mm,
I could not be in a bathroom by myself.
hmm
There was no way I could take a bath by myself. I had extreme fear. Somebody, like my mom or my grandma, had to sit in there with me just so I could bathe. I could not sleep in a bed by myself because I was horrifically afraid. When I would spend the night with my grandma and grandpa, my mom's mom and dad, they had a bedroom and it had a little bed. We called it the little bed. It was the twin
mm,
in the room where their bed was. And it was like for me,
mm,
but I couldn't sleep in it. The only way I could sleep is if we pushed it against my grandparents' bed and I
mm,
got like right next to my grandma. But
mm,
I would lay awake all night and just be absolutely terrified. So there was extreme fear. I never fit in with other kids. I never really had friends. I didn't have a friend group. I
mm,
was very awkward, very, very painfully shy. In
mm,
school, I would never succeeded at all. I never excelled. I many times, even if I knew the answer, if the teacher was asking a question,
mm,
I would just be sitting there saying, "Please don't call on me. Please don't call on me," because I wanted no attention on myself.
mm,
I was very moody. My moods were erratic. They were up and down and all over the place. By the time I hit my teenage years, you add in the hormonal changes and all
yeah.
of that. I became very unstable mentally. I would claw my
Mm,
face sometimes. I would just get so emotional burst of just angst. I would claw my face. There was times I would punch myself in the head. I would hit myself with a brush. I was also very rebellious. I never wanted to do what my mom and stepdad told me. I would sneak out. I started hanging out with older. I mean, I went from being interested in boys to having sexual relationships with men. By the time I was 14, I
mm,
was sleeping with guys who were 24, 26, 28.
mm,
Um, I had no respect or boundaries for my body. My body meant absolutely nothing to me. I just didn't care.
mm,
So, I mean, there were signs, but I think that they just really didn't know what they were signs of.
yeah.
I was never what you would call a typical child,
Mm,
never from birth, because I was born into domestic violence.
mm,
So it already had started changing me.
yeah.
And the fear that I had already started changing me. So it probably looked typical for me, but it did not, comparing me to other kids, I was never typical, but I think they just didn't know what to do with it.
Mm. Okay. And that's, yeah, obviously, like we just said, so nobody was aware of this, so they were just grasping at possible causes. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, I think so. At one point, my mom and stepdad thought maybe I was taking drugs. They didn't
Mm,
know if I was like getting drugs at school and if I was or drinking.
Mm.
They knew that I had a volatile, well, it wasn't even volatile. They knew that my biological dad was, for all purposes, not a father to me at all,
Mm.
because he was not the type of abuser who was kind and gentle at times and then there was the abuse.
Mm.
He was very mean. Like, he would make fun of my weight, he would make fun of my looks, he would laugh at me, make jokes. I mean, I remember one Christmas he came in and said, "Oh, I wonder what I got you this year," because his parents were the ones who always bought me the presents. And he thought it was
Mm.
hilarious that he didn't even know what they had put to be from him that year. So, I
Mm.
mean, he was never kind. And so I don't know if my parents thought that that was part of the issue, just because I had this biological dad who was kind of not nice.
Yeah.
I do know at one point they thought that maybe I was on drugs. They
Mm.
thought that I had mental illness because my biological dad obviously had massive mental illness. And so
Mm.
there were times that they thought maybe I had inherited something from him. They
Mm-hmm.
really just did not know exactly what was going on with me. My mom and stepdad married when I was around 12. So he
Mm.
came in when all of this stuff was just blowing up. And they had a son.
Mm.
They almost immediately got pregnant after their marriage. And so they thought that maybe there was some jealousy there, because
Mm.
we were raised completely different. The home life that my brother had was not the life that I had. And so they didn't know if that was an issue. It had been just me and my mom for many years. And then my
Mm.
stepdad came in. They didn't know if it was that I wasn't adjusting well to that. They didn't know.
Yeah.
They had no idea.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
whenever I was around 12, I wrote a story at school about a girl who had to go live with her father, and she committed suicide. And that flagged, my teacher, and my teacher took it to the school social worker.
Mm.
And then they had me start into therapy. That didn't stick. I lied. I was like, "There's nothing going on. I'm fine. It was just creative." That was all it was. But then, just a little bit later, then my mom and stepdad put me back into therapy. I'm not exactly sure why. I did start cutting then. That
Mm.
may be why. But I don't know what triggered them, other than my biological dad trying to commit suicide. I mean, that in and of itself was traumatic. He
Mm.
had shot himself through his chin and it
Oh.
lodged into his skull, but
Mm.
it didn't do a lot of damage.
Mm.
And that may have been the reason why. But I know that they put me into family, or into individual counseling.
Mm.
But the issue was, the counselor never had any family sessions with us.
Mm.
She never set my parents down, my mom and stepdad, and said, "This is what's going on. This is how you can help her." There was no advice given. There was no modalities of treatment, absolutely nothing. She met with me and only me.
Mm.
And I did disclose the abuse to her for the first time, and she didn't report it. And I don't know what it's like in other countries, but in America, therapists are mandated reporters. Like,
Mm.
I mean, I went to college and became a mental health therapist.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that blew me away about my own situation was learning how that we're mandated,
Mm.
licensed to report abuse. And she didn't report it. She never reported it to anybody. What she did was she wrote a letter to my biological dad and alluded to the fact that he had abused me, and said that I needed some space from him and some time. That was the first time anybody in any side of my family even heard anything at all that I had been through, anything. And it wasn't even a very specific. It didn't talk about the ritualistic abuse.
Mm.
It didn't talk about like Satanism. It didn't talk about any specifics of sexual abuse. It just said that I had went through some things with him and I needed a break from him to figure some stuff out, basically, is what it said.
Wow. Well, no, I want to say, because I mean, first off, like, as a social worker, I'm mandated to report if there's any disclosures or anything like that. You know, other than a basic duty of care from one person to another, I'm legally bound that I have to do something. So that shocks and saddens me. I suppose, like you say, it was, yeah, a different time back then, but I don't know. I think basic humanity would trump what was going on there. And so your mum and your stepdad weren't informed of this, but your dad was. And so did you tell her, the thoughts you had about, you were keeping it all in because you were of the belief that he knew if you were thinking things about him that he would make it worse. She was aware of
Um,
that.
I don't remember exactly what I told her.
Mm,
Because at that time in my life I was so used to disassociating. Like
mm,
I was so used to just checking out.
yeah.
I lived somewhere else in
Mm,
my mind. I would create fantasies in my mind. I would create alternate realities. I would suppress everything. I would count. It was so easy for me to step back. And there's still a lot of memories that I just don't have. I mean, I
mm,
know for sure I was abused. I have memories of abuse.
mm,
But to say that I know exactly what I told her, I don't really know
mm,
exactly what I told her. I do know this for a fact. She took me and my situation as a case study and presented it in some type of forum
mm,
because she was so fascinated by it. So I'm assuming that I told her some of this because I don't know why else she would be so fascinated with it
mm,
and why she used me and my family as a case study. So I'm
mm,
assuming there was more that was said. Recently I've really been thinking about trying to contact her just to see if she has any notes left or if
mm,
she has that case study left. She's not practicing anymore. She hasn't for a while. She retired several years ago.
mm,
But I would definitely be interested in seeing that because she did tell my mom that I had been sexually abused. She told my mom and my stepdad that I had been sexually abused, but she didn't offer any help with helping me to cope with that. So from that moment, my parents, my mom and stepdad, knew that I had been sexually abused. And
mm,
my biological dad knew that I was talking to a therapist about something.
mm,
And his parents knew. His parents had a complete and total fit. They were very angry at me. And they said no matter what he had done to me, I needed to be part of his life and that it was my job to take care of him and that when they passed, it would be my job to step in and take care of him, to be his caregiver.
wow.
And they did not take my side at all. They coddled him and babied him and made excuses and basically said if I wasn't going to have a relationship with him, I wasn't going to have a relationship with them. And so, in that, I really lost a relationship with my grandparents.
Mm,
And until that moment, I had been their favorite grandchild, which I
mm,
don't think is good. I would never recommend grandparents doing that at all. But they had never made any signs of hiding that I was their favorite. But I
mm,
realized in that moment it had nothing to do with me, but it
mm,
had everything to do with my biological dad. I was
mm.
their favorite because I was his,
Right.
because he was their favorite. He had siblings and he was always the favorite. I mean, always. The type of different treatment he had, we could spend an hour talking about this, the just the detrimental effect that could have in a family. But he was treated very differently. He was the favorite, and because of that, I was. But in that moment, whenever I disclosed and had some time away from him,
Mm,
everything changed. They never treated me the same again. They never looked at me the same. It was always because of who I was to him. But
mm,
I only stayed away for a short period of time. This is the other thing that I don't really have a clear a lot of people question this and I don't have answers for it. So it was basically left up to me how long I didn't want to have visits with him.
mm,
Nobody else stepped in and said, "Oh, you can't go back over there. You can't be around him." It was just left up to me. And
mm,
I stayed away for a little while, but whenever I was away from him, it was worse than when I was going around him because it still was ingrained in me. If I talked bad about him, he would kill me.
mm.
And so it was more like the idea of keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
Yeah.
So I only stayed away probably about 6 months or so, and then I started going back around him again, visiting his house where he lived with his parents. And when I would go, which wasn't often, but I would go some. His sister lived on the same property, so I would most of the time stay at her house. But when I would stay there, I would sleep all night with a can of hairspray.
Mm,
And I would stay, well, I wouldn't sleep. I would stay awake all night with a can of hairspray in my hand, thinking if he walked in the bedroom, I could spray him in the eyes and run out.
mm,
So that pretty much was my teenage years.
mm,
And I didn't stop going over there again. It was off and on throughout my life. And in my early 20s, I stopped for good and I never saw him again. Like from my
mm,
early 20s until the day that he passed, I had no relationship with him
mm,
whatsoever or really his parents. I I never really I did sit down at the table one day and talked to my grandmother and told her flat out that he had sexually abused me and that was why I had broken relationship. And she was basically she's like, I don't know what you want me to do. He's my son. And
mm,
I had nowhere to go with that. There was really nowhere to go with that. And I didn't hate her. I had forgiven her. I mean, I'm a Christian. We're called to forgive. So I had walked through forgiving all of them. But I just didn't want relationship with her. And I definitely didn't want my child around her. So I maintained a close relationship with his sister and some of my cousins. And that really was about it. And he passed away um, somewhere between 2012 and 2020. I'm not sure exactly when.
Okay. Well, so, I mean, if I can go back, just for clarity, what was your mum's response upon hearing what had happened to you?
She did not. She wasn't surprised, I don't think, because Jim had my biological dad had so many issues. I don't think anybody was shocked. I mean, there was nobody like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that." Everybody thought he was weird. Everybody thought he was odd. Everybody knew he was hooked on pornography and was just like gross in the things that he watched and listened to. So nobody was profoundly shocked. He had been open and talked about the occult, some of the occult involvement he had been in. I mean, he didn't tell everything, but he had talked about um that it doesn't. I try not to. I don't want to
Yeah, no,
put triggers
that's
out there for
absolutely fine.
anybody. Yeah. So I mean, he had talked openly about some of the things he had been involved in, but people always just had the idea of, oh, he's just crazy. Like the crazy uncle that talks craziness and
Yeah.
nobody listens to or gives value to. He was like that in the family, from my side and from his side. Even his own family, they wouldn't listen to a thing he said. They would just disregard, except his parents. And so I think nobody was shocked. Um, but I don't really know. I think that it was a very difficult time because I was out of control.
Mm,
I was absolutely on the brink of just out of control is the only word I know how to put to it.
mm,
Nobody still knew how to help me. Nobody knew what to do. I, by that time, had started getting interested, as I said, in older men. So I was running around with older guys. That's all I thought about. That's all I did was hang out with older people. And I think she really just didn't know what to do with me or to
mm,
do with the information.
mm.
And I think that it was just very overwhelming for everybody at that time in our life. When I was 16, I started dating a guy my own age. Well, he was 18, so he was just a little bit older than me. And I looked from the outside looking in to visibly have calmed down in my life. I wasn't out running around anymore. I wasn't being erratic. I wasn't trying to sneak out and do those things. And so I think whenever that happened, I feel like that everybody kind of breathed a sigh of relief, like, oh, she's calming down. She got through some of the tumultuous years. Things are going to get better. And I ended up getting married. I got married when I was 16 the first time. And that wasn't unusual for my family because all the women in my family got married young. My mom got married at 17, my grandma at 15, my aunts in their teens. And so I got married, and for all intents and purposes, it looked like I'd calmed down. I had a son. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was taking care of him. And I think everybody thought that it would probably be smooth sailing from there on out. But nobody really knew what was going on. Inside our home, there was domestic violence. He beat me all the time, horrifically beat me. And I never once thought about telling because my biological dad had already groomed me and
Mm,
trained me that you don't tell.
yeah.
What do you do with abuse? You cover it, you hide it. I mean, I can remember having bruises and lying and saying my son had accidentally butted me. One time I had bruises underneath both like my eyes, and I said, "Oh, well, my son hit my nose," or you know,
Mm,
just making excuses.
mm,
And so I stayed in that marriage for about 6 years.
mm,
And then I just couldn't take it anymore. The abuse was getting worse and worse. And I seen the toll it was taking on my son because he
mm,
was watching. And so I left him. But in the midst of that, when I was around 18, I started going to church because my mom and stepdad had started going, and it had changed their lives.
yeah.
Becoming a Christian had drastically changed them, and I seen what it had done in their life. And my stepdad used to be an alcoholic, all of those things. They started going to church, their lives were going way better.
Mm,
And so I started going. My ex-husband actually started going too, and we got saved when I was 18
mm,
and got very heavily involved in the church, but he didn't stay. I did, but he
mm,
didn't. And so I ended up getting divorced. The whole time, though, my whole entire life, I struggled horrifically
Mm,
with PTSD, clinical depression, OCD, and it was just a very, very difficult battle. I ended up
mm,
getting remarried shortly after the divorce because I was also very codependent, couldn't be
mm-hmm,
alone. And when I got remarried, my family again thought, okay, because this new guy was a great guy.
mm,
He was very caring and took very good care of me, that okay, I'm finally in a stable situation. Now I'm going to be okay. And it just
mm,
wasn't the case because
mm.
I had never healed. I had
Yeah.
never healed from any of the abuse. I had never healed from any of the trauma. And
Mm,
so when I got remarried, I decided to go to college to become a mental health therapist. I actually got a master's in social work so that I could become a mental health therapist.
mm,
I lasted for 2 years in the field because I was not healed.
mm,
So I would go to work all day and hear children's stories of being sexually abused and having to report the trauma and all of these things. And it was triggering me left and
yeah.
right. I mean, if you can imagine someone so unhealed and then they're hearing stories that is just like their life. And so it
Mm,
just wasn't possible. I would go home in the evening and I would cut like on
mm,
my legs, my arms, my stomach, just to make it through the evening with my family.
mm,
And so I decided to go back into therapy for myself. And I went in my early, I don't know, mid 20s. And that was whenever I picked up the diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder. The
mm,
others I'd already had. I got diagnosed with those when I was a
mm,
teenager, but that one was the new one. And it wasn't surprising to me because I knew I had heard voices for years. I heard
mm,
voices in my head. If I was awake, I was hearing voices. And honestly, sometimes I would get woken up because I was hearing voices. When I was in college, I would have to turn the television on just to drown out the voices in my head so that I
mm,
could study. They had distinct personalities. My eyes would change color depending on who was around. And so it did not surprise me at all when she diagnosed me with that, but that was one I wanted to hide. I
mm,
didn't mind that people knew I had depression. I didn't mind that people knew I had PTSD, but the DID, I did not want anybody to know because I felt like people would look at me like I was crazy, and I did
yeah.
not want to look weak. I didn't want to look like there was something wrong with me. But another thing her and I decided very early on, I think I'd been in therapy like 2 weeks, that it was
Mm,
no longer ethical for me to practice, which I think I just needed somebody to say it with
mm,
me. Like I knew it wasn't a secret to me. I knew that I needed to not be practicing, but I needed that backup from a professional to say, you need to step away.
yeah.
And so I resigned and I stepped away with the idea that I would do some inner work and go back to counseling
Mm,
again, maybe in a couple years or a year or so.
yeah.
That did not happen. It ended up being over 10 years that I got worse and worse and worse and worse.
Mm,
And it wasn't until around 2019, 2020 that I really started understanding the spiritual aspect of mental illness. I
okay.
had been in the church since I was 18. I had been
Mm,
saved since I was 18, but I was never in churches that taught anything about spiritual warfare, that taught anything about like deliverance ministry,
mm,
casting out demons, getting free from any of those things.
mm,
My idea before that was a very medically modeled way.
mm,
If you have trauma, you probably have a chemical imbalance in your brain and you need to take a pill to fix it. God
yeah.
could heal that, but you need to take a pill until he does. That was
Yeah.
my idea for all of those years. I had been on medications,
Mm,
therapies, I tried REMD, all of the things, and
mm,
nothing helped. I just got worse. I got maxed out on Effexor. I think I was on Effexor for 15 plus years, maxed out,
wow.
and nothing was really helping, nothing was working. So when I started hearing about spiritual warfare, I'm like, I got to
Mm,
check into that. I got to see if that's me. And
mm.
turns out it was.
Wow. Well, if I can
My
ask,
parent,
sorry, I'm sorry to cut you. We can go back. You said that you got worse. This is when you were from your original diagnoses up until the point that we've reached now. Can you just let me know what did that look like for you? Or what did it involve?
yeah, so the depression was so bad, it was physically painful, is the only
Mm,
way I know how to describe it. If you've been there, you know.
mm,
If you haven't, it's hard to describe, but it was physically painful. It felt like every single day I was dangling over the deepest, darkest pit that you could not see the bottom of, and I was
Mm,
only hanging on by one finger. And at any
mm,
moment that could break and I could fall, and I
mm,
would never come back. There was times I would sit on the edge of my bed and I would be rocking back and forth, telling myself, "Your name is Nichole. Your child is, your husband is," saying their names over and over because I was on the brink of insanity. There was
mm,
times I felt like I was slipping away and I wouldn't remember who I was. The
mm,
voices in my head would always ask me to take the driver's seat, and for them to take the driver's seat and me to just step back.
mm,
There were times that I was so disassociated, I disassociated so bad that my husband would come home and I would be rocking in the floor crying, saying, "Where's mommy? Why
mm,
doesn't mommy come? Will she come rescue me?"
mm,
The fear was so bad I couldn't sleep at night. I would sleep with all the lights on, with like two blankets over me because the terror was so horrific. The triggers for PTSD, I had hundreds.
mm,
There would be smells, clothes, body type, phrases, television shows, songs, foods, geographical locations, types of shoes, facial hair. Like my husband and I had to tailor our lives around the triggers. When I would have them, sometimes I would feel like I couldn't breathe. Sometimes I wouldn't even know what had triggered me, but I would just have this overwhelming sense of dread,
mm,
fear. There would be times I would say, "He's going to come get me," because I felt like he was my biological dad
mm,
was coming, but it was because something triggered it, and I wouldn't always know exactly what that was. I had horrific nightmares, uh, sometimes nightly. I would have nightmares about being raped, stabbed, killed. I would have nightmares of ritualistic abuse where there were several people involved. Sometimes they were wearing hoods where I couldn't see their faces. Other times they were like in a cult and they were wearing all the same clothes. The depression was like a cloud that I just never could see the light through.
mm,
I would feel suicidal ideation pretty much all the time. The voices in my head would tell me that my family would be better without me, that it would be better if I just died and went to be with Jesus, that I could finally rest, that I deserved to rest, that I should just do it, that I should follow through with it. But from the time my son was born, he was my anchor to life. God always used him and would remind me, if I did kill myself, what would happen to my son?
mm,
Because his biological father was abusive and he had already lost custody.
mm,
And so my son didn't have one of his biological parents. And if I died, he would have lost both of his biological parents. And so I
mm,
never followed through with it, but I fought it tooth and nail.
mm,
The voices would tell me that I was a burden to my family, that nobody loved me, that I was awful. They would tell me that if God loved me, he wouldn't have let me walk through that. How could a loving God let me walk through the things that I walked through? It was torment. Like, that's the only word. I don't know what other word to use than horrific torment. If I was awake, I was being tormented. I never felt connected to my family. I never felt like I could really show them who I was. I never felt like I even knew who I was. There was a wall between me and everybody, including God. I kept everybody at arm's length because I didn't trust anyone. Because I felt like I couldn't trust God to keep me safe. If I can't even trust God, then I
mm,
definitely can't trust people. So I
mm,
became very self reliant because I felt like I was the only one that had my best interest in mind and I was the only one who could protect myself.
mm. Wow.
Yeah.
And and so you went through this for, well, from your teenage years up until about 2019, 2020. Is that right?
More than my teenage years, pretty much from
Mm,
as far as I can remember. I never remember a time in my life where I didn't have fear and depression
mm.
and anxiety. Like, I don't think that there was ever a time that I didn't have those three.
Wow. Well, yeah, I can't imagine what that'd be like for a short burst, let alone for such a prolonged period as that. And so the medical establishment, they tried giving you pills, therapy, etc. You said you'd followed like a medical model of things, and none of this had worked. Um, were there any other like interventions or help offered by anybody?
Um, no. The only things, again, was relaxation techniques,
Mm,
guided imagery. There was some of that. I saw different therapists, so there was different modalities.
Mm,
With the therapist who diagnosed me with DID, it was more the idea I was offered to accept the other parts of me, like with the DID, the other voices, the other people, the alters
mm,
is what she called them, to accept them as part of me, to allow them to speak through me and allow them to have room in my life because they were part of me, and was more of a just accepting that self-love, loving myself,
mm,
forgiveness, walking through forgiving the people who had hurt me, um, and medication. I mean, that was really all, and rapid eye movement
mm,
desensitization, but I never could do that type of therapy. I tried that one several times,
mm,
and I almost got hospitalized after trying it. Like I just could not do that type of therapy. It was too intense for me.
mm,
Talk therapy, cognitive behavioral, trying to change the thought processes. Um, just
mm,
nothing worked. So I basically gave up on all of that. Like I
mm,
had stepped away from doing any type of therapy for several years because I'm
mm,
like, it doesn't work. Like I've been there, I've done that. I'm a therapist myself, and like I'm
mm.
seeing it just did not work for me.
Yeah.
And every time I would try to go into therapy, it would just get worse. It would never
Mm,
get better. It would get worse. And so I'm like, I'm not trying that anymore. Whenever 2020 hit, I was at the end. I really did not know if I was going to live much longer because I was also physically very, very sick. I was going back and forth to the Mayo Clinic. I had some really weird breathing issues, things going on. I had a lot of chronic sicknesses. I was close to 300 pounds. It was a very, very dark time in my life.
mm,
And so by then, I wasn't trying anything.
mm,
I gave up. I wasn't even on medication anymore. I gotten
mm,
off medication. I wasn't going back on medication. I was just done.
mm. Wow. So yeah, you got to this point of, I suppose, yeah, just like you said, giving up, and then you heard about spiritual warfare around this time. And so, what was the difference there? I mean, you tried all these other modalities, decided it didn't work. What was it that resonated about this with you to think, hang on a minute, this is something I need to pay attention to?
Well, there was another piece that I haven't talked about yet
Hmm,
that I had experienced from the time I was a child.
okay.
I would see shadow people walking through my house. I would hear
Wow.
voices externally, not just
Hmm,
internally. There were times I would wake up from dreams and have handprint bruises on my body that didn't fit my hands. Like I would try to make my
hmm,
hands fit, they didn't fit. I would have scratch marks. I would get bite marks sometimes. There was times I woke up with what looked like animals had bit me.
hmm,
There was times that my bed would shake all night long. Like I would be in bed trying to sleep, and there would be something there shaking it all night long. I would hear my name being called. So I knew that I had spiritual warfare. I just didn't have the verbiage to put to it.
hmm,
So I had always known prior to getting saved, becoming a Christian, I thought they were a ghost.
hmm,
I thought that I was super sensitive to ghosts and that wherever I went, they were there. After getting saved, I recognized, no, and I mean, reading the Bible and understanding God and the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm, there's angels, there's demons, there's God, there's the devil. And so I understood then that they were demons. So I knew that I had demons around me. I
hmm,
just didn't know what to do about it. I had no idea how to handle it. So like my family and I would talk about it because there was different times in my life that I lived with my parents for
hmm,
one reason or another. Every time I lived with them, they would start experiencing things. So it wasn't just me.
hmm,
They would start hearing things. They would see things. My mom seen shadows walking through the house, peeping around the corner at her, and they would hear screams like going through the house. They would see things and hear things. So the only thing that we could ever come up with, excuse me, was that because I had been introduced to the occult at
hmm,
such a young age that I was just a magnet for the demonic. But
hmm,
none of us, we were all Christians in church, had been in church for years.
hmm,
None of us knew what to do with it. So the first time I heard a sermon that said how to combat spiritual warfare, it clicked and I knew,
hmm,
okay, this is for me. This is exactly what I need to do with. But in that moment, I didn't know, did I have a couple demons in me? Did I
hmm,
have some physical sicknesses that need to be healed? Did I have mental illness that needed to be healed? I didn't know what was what. I hadn't
hmm,
tried to sort everything out. I just knew that what I was hearing resonated and that I needed to do what those pastors were saying to do to get rid of everything spiritual, like demons,
hmm,
so then I could maybe heal whatever was left. So going into the prayer that my parents and I had, the prayer day that we had and set aside, I had no idea if I had altars from the DID, if I had maybe a few and some of them were demons. We had no clue what was
Mm.
what, but we just went into it and said, if there's anything demonic, it has to go.
Mm.
And it turns out it was on 100% demonic. I had between 40 and 65 demons that got cast out of my body.
Wow.
Once they were out, I no longer had one symptom of mental illness. Like it took 4.5 hours. We were together 4.5 hours.
Mm.
And after that was over, immediately you could physically see the change. My face physically changed. My eyes physically changed. The way that I walked physically changed.
Mm.
And my head was silent. My mind was silent for the first time in my entire life. And I've not had one symptom of any of the mental illness diagnosis since May 24th of 2020. And so it's been over 5 years.
Wow. Well, I mean, this sounds amazing to me. And again, please forgive me, because this just puts me in mind of the Exorcist movie. I mean, is it? Can you please explain to me what it's like? Because I genuinely don't know. Because this sounds like a hell of a lot to unpack, especially for somebody who's not around any of that life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the Exorcist movie is very theatrical.
Yeah.
So put that aside.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, that first and foremost, put that
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
aside. It's very, very theatrical. It was not like that.
Mm.
I will say demons did speak out of my mouth. My
Mm-hmm.
voice changed. My face changed. It was not me speaking.
Mm.
It became a very deep, guttural voice. The things that they said was not me saying them. Uh, but more, I don't know if you've ever read any of the Bible. I would suggest to get more familiar with this, to read in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Mm-hmm.
Those are where Jesus cast out demons. You can read in those four books where he would tell demons to go and they left.
Mm.
And that's what it was exactly like. My stepdad would say, in the name of Jesus, I command you to leave her now.
Mm.
And there was some back and forth. The demons put up a fight. They didn't want to leave. But it wasn't like spitting up green pea soup.
Mm.
I wasn't levitating. My
Yeah.
face wasn't cracked. And it was none of those things.
Mm.
It was just, it was demonstrative because they did put up a fight
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't want to go, but it wasn't like that.
Mm.
My head didn't spin around. I didn't
No.
do, that whole thing.
Yeah.
But there was yelling, there was
Mm.
screaming, there was some spitting, there was some pain when they
Mm.
came out. I felt pain sometimes, like they were being ripped out,
Mm.
and I felt their personalities. As each one would go, I recognized who they were because it was ones that I had accepted as alters, and I
Mm.
thought they were part of me.
Mm.
And I felt them leave my body. There
Mm.
was no doubt this was not like a psychosomatic moment. I felt them leave my body.
Mm.
And when they left, every character trait that I thought was mine was gone with them. Like I
Mm.
thought I was a very angry person. I used to be a person that if I perceived you looked at me the wrong way, I was ready to fight. God didn't create me to be that way. That's not
Mm.
the fruit of the Spirit. He doesn't create us to be that way.
Mm.
And I always thought because of the trauma that it became part of me and helped mold who I was. And God showed me that's a lie.
Mm.
We can strip off every lie of the enemy and walk in the identity that God has given us. And so as those character traits came out or the demons came out, I felt those character traits and I no longer had them. They were separate. They weren't a part of me anymore. And
Mm.
that was another thing that was very, very different because I felt them come out and it's hard to describe. Like imagine having the worst depression imaginable. Like my baseline was literally like an 8.
Mm.
That was a good day.
Mm.
Baseline of 8 for depression, 8 out of 10 for my whole life.
Mm.
And then having zero depression, none,
Mm.
like none. And it just being gone. That's what it was like.
Wow.
The OCD, it left. I stopped
Mm.
counting. I didn't have the need to count. I had
Mm.
counted incessantly from the time I remember starting to count when I was 7. I don't know if I did it prior to that, but I remember starting to count when I was 7.
Mm.
And in a moment's time, I no longer had the need to count. Gluttony was gone. I was no longer addicted to food. I used to be heavily, and obviously I'm still working on weight issues, but now it's like I just need to make a better choice. I'm not driven to eat. I don't have addictive behaviors to food because that was
Mm.
broken. That just completely left. PTSD, I went into that with, I'm not joking. If I tried to list all my triggers, I know they would be over 100. If I
Mm.
sat down, and I've never done that. Maybe I should do that one day because
Mm.
I don't want to exaggerate, but I know it was over 100. Zero. I have zero triggers.
Mm.
I couldn't have this conversation with you prior to 2020. We couldn't
Wow.
even have talked about it. I couldn't have talked about what it was like. I couldn't have talked about my visits there.
Mm.
I would have been in bed for a month if I even tried to speak about it. That's why I could never go in therapy because every
Mm.
time I would go to therapy, it would get worse because I
Yeah.
tried to talk about it.
Mm.
Now, if we were on a private conversation, I could tell you detail after detail, and it does not trigger me anymore at all.
Mm.
And I'm not suppressing it.
Mm.
It's just it
Yeah.
doesn't trigger me anymore. It's
Mm.
gone.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, sorry, can I just ask as well? During this coming out and what have you, were you conscious at all, or were you just sort of feeling sensations? You mentioned you felt pain as there was an exit, as there was exit. But other than that, how how in the moment were you?
That's an interesting question because I don't remember everything.
Mm.
My mom has told me some things. My mom and stepdad were there,
Mm.
and I remember a lot. I was there.
Mm.
It was just like, it wasn't like I was disassociating because I had done that for many, many years.
Mm.
It was more like at times I was mute and
Mm.
they were the ones speaking through me
Mm.
because I could hear what they were saying. I would hear them use my voice.
Mm.
I would hear what they were saying. There was one that would not leave. My stepdad was commanding and commanding it to go, and it would not leave. And I heard the Lord speak to me and he said to me, "You have to break identity with this one.
Mm.
You have to tell it it's not part of you." And so I verbally did that. I said, "You are not part of me. I revoke my invitation to my life and you may not stay." And that was one that I had protected at all cost because I thought it was my protector. It
Mm.
would always present to me that it was protecting me from everybody else and that I needed it and it kept me safe. But
Mm.
the truth of the matter was it kept everybody at arm's length because it hated everybody.
Mm.
Um, and when that one came out, like I felt, when I say pain, there was times I felt them like being ripped out of my stomach.
Mm.
There were times I felt them coming up out of my throat, almost like they were like clawing and scratching to stay in, but they were
Mm.
being made evicted to leave.
Mm.
I was pretty much there the whole time, but it was more dull. I don't know if
Mm.
that makes sense,
Mm.
but it was like dull. Like I heard it from a distance. I witnessed
Yeah.
it from a distance, but
So
I
you were
didn't miss
like a
it.
passive observer, for want of a better
Yeah,
phrase, and this was right. Okay, yeah, no,
yeah.
I think I sort of semi understand. Yeah, the process. So, well, you said this went on for what, 4.5 hours continually, roughly there or thereabouts, and
Yeah.
then at the end of it, what it was like the noise had stopped, like you felt calm throughout, like what did that? Because I can imagine. And forgive me, but after so many years in chaos, to
Hmm.
suddenly come through the other side, I could imagine that being quite frightening in a way, as well as feeling good because it's unfamiliar. Was there any sense of that, or did you just feel it was a calm because this is gone?
Yeah, there was absolutely no fear because
Mm.
I had been to the level of torment that I was on the brink of insanity. I was on the brink of always wanting to kill myself. So when that was gone, it was just pure and utter joy. Like it
Mm.
was just, and in me, I knew at that moment that I was going to surrender my life completely and fully to God, and there would
Mm.
be no looking back ever. Like I
Mm.
would never get back in that situation. I would
Mm.
never go back. I would never give in to that. I was never taking a step back. So it was
Mm.
just complete and utter. It was peace.
Yeah.
For the first time in my life, I understood how people could say that they didn't have anything going on in their head. When
Mm.
people would say that, I'd be like, "What do you mean you have nothing going on?" Like I hear chatter 24/7. You don't hear nothing?
Mm.
And I understood for the first time in my life what it meant to have peace in my mind. I knew what it meant to have the joy of the Lord because I
Mm.
never experienced his full joy because I had all that in
Yeah.
there. And so, no, I was just like, utterly and totally sold
Mm,
out to God
mm,
in joy and in peace and ready for the rest of my life.
mm. No, I love that. I love that. And I've got to say, nobody deserves it more based on the conversation we've spoke about. So if I can then ask, from this point, how did you move forward until you set up the Fullness of Joy Ministry and to what you do today? What were the steps you took there?
There's been a lot.
Mm,
The first thing I did was completely and totally surrender to God and say, whatever you want for my life, my answer is yes.
mm-hmm,
And I live that every single day of my life, not looking back. My life is not my own. I owe him
mm,
everything. And so it it really started from a place of complete and total surrender to him
mm,
and asking him, what do you want for the rest of my life? The other was asking him who he created me to be, because there was a whole lot of stripping off that had to
mm,
happen because I had believed so many lies about myself, so many lies about God. So that was a process that I still walk through. There's still things that I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's not me. That, that's not who I am.
mm,
And then the other one is absolutely learning my complete authority through Jesus Christ. So when the enemy when demons try to come at me and speak lies to me, that I recognize them and tell them to go. Well, as soon as he set me free, I heard him say, I gave you the blueprint to get free. Now go help other people get free.
mm,
And I said, okay, Lord, I'm all in. Whatever that looks like for the rest
mm,
of my life, I'm all in, having
mm-hmm.
absolutely no clue what that meant. But the first thing he told me to do was share my testimony.
Mm,
And I said, oh Lord, people already thought I'm crazy. They're really going to think I'm nuts now. So I shared my testimony on Facebook Live. I did it like at 1 a.m. in the morning because I
mm,
didn't want any questions. I just wanted to get on there and get out. And it went viral, like it went around the world.
mm,
People from all over the world started reaching out to me saying, I need what you went through. Like, I need to walk through those same steps and I don't have anybody
mm,
to help me. And I was like, Lord, what do I do? And he said, help them.
mm,
So I started walking people through on Zoom. The same thing that my parents helped me walk through, I was helping them walk through.
mm.
And I was doing that a lot, like 6, 7 times a week.
Wow.
And sessions like can take hours. And
Yeah.
so that's was consuming most of my time. And then I recognized that he had wanted me to start teaching,
Mm,
teaching about spiritual warfare, teaching about how to get free from trauma, because this is stuff that medicine can't give you. Like
mm,
like medicine isn't going to give you this type of freedom. It just isn't. Medicine can mask the symptoms, but it doesn't cure the issue.
mm,
And so I started doing a lot of teaching. And then he told me to write a book. So I started writing books, and I wrote a few, and I started an online community. And where I'm at today is I do a lot of teaching. I do group deliverance sessions 4 times a year. I do conferences online. I do training, teaching. I talk to people behind the scenes. I answer questions. I have a monthly prayer meeting, a monthly Q&A meeting, and that's pretty much where we're at today. And it just boils down to surrender. Like in
mm,
every season, I'm taking December off to seek God. What does he want exactly for me in
mm-hmm,
2026, for me personally and for me in ministry, because my life is not my own. Like that's how I live my life. It's not my own. I owe him
mm-hmm,
everything.
mm-hmm. And so, I mean, does this come to you just randomly out of nowhere, just so that, or is it you might have a dream, you might how does this arrive?
For me, it was my son reached out to me and he said, "Mom, I think you need to listen to the this minister."
Mm,
And I said, "Okay." And I turned on a clip of a minister speaking about deliverance, and
mm,
2 minutes in, I knew that was me.
mm,
Like I knew I needed what he was talking about. It
yeah.
was one conversation, one sermon that sparked all of this.
Mm, wow. And so now I don't know, you be moving through your day and you may have some, let's say, epiphany, for want of a better phrase, that directs you to do certain works. I mean, would that mean if you felt the call to, go abroad and set up something? I don't know. Is that possible? Is that what you would do? Is that what it would look like?
I'll go wherever he tells me to
Yeah.
go.
Wow.
And I hear him speak to me. It's
Yeah.
not, yeah, like I hear God speak, and whenever he speaks, I go. He's not done that yet. I do conferences like for Kenya. There's places
Hmm.
in Africa. I've done conferences, but it's all been on Zoom.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. My
Mm.
life is not my own. Like I mean that literally. My life is not
Yeah.
my own, and I'll go where he tells me to go. I would love to be able to stay centered or stationed where my grandsons are,
Mm.
but I've even surrendered that to him. That's my heart.
Yeah.
But more than that, I'm a servant of God. And so wherever he calls me, that's where I'll go. Whatever he wants from me, that's what I'll give.
Well, I've got to say, I found this conversation fascinating and very, very edifying. You know, when we started talking, I think it was a couple of months ago now to set up this meeting because I believe you'd been away and there were things going on. But yeah, I've read, in your background and things like that, and there's so much that, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not religious. I'm not anti-religious by any means, but yeah, I have seen things that I think there's no earthly explanation for this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm waiting to hear a voice. I don't know. But in the meantime, I do love to hear stories such as these of people who've, let's say, defied the odds. I don't even know if that's the right phrase, but you yourself were ready to give up on getting better and what have you, and then things changed. So that's amazing. But thank you for your time today, Nichole. I've been blown away by what you've told me. That's been amazing.
Well, thank you for allowing me to share so openly. I appreciate your platform and the invite and the time we've spent talking.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've got so much from today. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you again out there for listening. As always, I appreciate your support. You can look out for me, as always, on Instagram and now TikTok under Social Harmony Talk, Facebook under Social Harmony Time to Talk. I'll put show links, selfies, information around new episodes, such like I will launch a new episode every Monday at 6 p.m. New Zealand time on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if I could ask you, follow me across those platforms, please. Like, comment, follow, share, all the things we love nowadays. And, well, if you'd like to join me for a conversation, please send me a message, get in touch, and we can arrange something for the future. But for now, go well, look after yourselves, and keep talking. Thanks again for listening.